This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily English Podcast here on the Global Sports Podcast Network. It is Forecast Friday, but we will also be looking at our Thursday night action in Europe. And joining me is Mikey Thompson, our resident here on the Friday Forecast. And what a week of football it has been in Europe, Mikey. Thank you very much for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here again with you, Louie. Yeah, absolutely. What a week of football. A lot of telltale signs that we can feed and filter into the Premier League. But I reckon we should probably start with my team, Man United, playing away at Real Sociedad.
Yes, fresh in the mind, of course. And when I think of Real Sociedad, I just look at their team and I think system player. And I just think their interplay, whenever I have seen Real Sociedad play, has been terrific. I didn't catch that match, but I know you watched the entire thing. Did it seem that way to you? Was it a proper technical battle? Or
from the neutral point of view, I thought it was quite a good game to watch. There was plenty going on. It obviously finished 1-1, which, as a United fan, is a decent result. But I'm a little bit disappointed. We drew 0-0 at half time, and United went for another record of not scoring in the first half, and that's 21 games now that Ruben Amorim hasn't scored in the first half of a game. When he first came in, the first 3 games we scored in the first half, and to go on that streak of not scoring, I think is pivotal to the results that they're producing. I think this game could have been quite comfortably a United win. There was an opportunity as Delors was on the wing. He decided to not fly the ball across, and it would have been quite an easy tap-in. And then later on in the game, we started the second half really well, and Garnacho had another similar chance where he just needed to whip it across. He went into the side netting as opposed to a cross goal, and again, those decision-making, we could have been 2 up and looking for a third. As it went, we went 1-0 up with Zerkze's goal, and then that was cancelled out with a penalty decision, which, by the letter of the law in today's game, is 100% a penalty. Fernandez handball, unorthodox position.
Well, let's just look at this as well from Real Sociedad's point of view, because they have had a difficult run of form. Because the last 2 matches that they played before this match were Barcelona and Real Madrid, both of which they failed to score a goal. Today they score, and Manchester United, I'm a little bit worried about their defence. And do you think that's fair? Because Manchester United are now 7 games without a clean sheet.
Yeah, I think it's so easy, and it's quite obvious that there's fundamental problems at United. There isn't a cohesion in the team. The starting 11 isn't a strong starting 11, and it's not difficult for anybody who is going against them to feel that there's a chance to get a result. That being said, United today showed signs of managing a game of football, taking a game attackingly away from home to a side. It's not a great result. I feel like we should have won. But everything in context, I think today isn't an horrendous result. And, next week at Old Trafford, who knows? It leads it nicely into the weekend with Arsenal anyway. It's getting a strong way result, unlike what they did on Wednesday night or Tuesday night. Tuesday night, I beg your pardon.
And I'd like to say, I did watch some of the game. I watched the highlights. And every time I saw United going forward, it seemed like Alejandro Garnacho had a lot to do with it. A word on him today?
Yeah, I'm impressed with Garnacho since the saga of being out of the team. I think his reaction to that since he's been coming back into the team has been positive. He probably is one of our stronger players after Bruno Fernandes. Consistency is the key, but we also forget just how young he is, and it's a lot to expect. Although he's not scored since November, and for an attacking forward at Man United who should be creating chances after chances, that's just not very acceptable. So his game, his performance is good, his efforts there, and that's what fans want to see. But scoring is definitely where we need to improve on that.
Speaking of scoring, Joshua Zerkze seemed to have a very different match to his recent unsuccess. I think it's fair to say at Manchester United, he's definitely been under the magnifying glass more than anyone in a Manchester United shirt this season, with big expectations of him when he joined. But he got the man of the match from the game. Do you think that's deserved? And do you think that this could be the start of potentially some good fortune for the Dutch striker?
Yeah, it's a tricky one really because he hasn't had a great start to his campaign at Man United. There's nothing to hide about that. But what is being shown is his performance and his work rate. And United fans genuinely fall in love with players who have a determination to track back, to do the jobs that that aren't as glamorous or what they should be doing. And I agree, as a striker, he should be up there finishing. But when you've got a player who's providing that work rate, it builds an atmosphere which is desperate for anyone who watches Man United at the minute. And if you compare him to our other option, Rasmus Højlund, he is, for me, so far off the game. You need somebody like that to be able to hold the ball up, and he can't do it. He loses possession far too many times. And I think that is a fundamental problem for Man United at the minute.
And just lastly on this game, before we move on to the other European games, the penalty against Bruno Fernandes, who had a match where he was constantly finding himself in arguments with the referee, something that neutral fans don't really like seeing too much of in the game. And in the end, he did get booked for having some strong words for the referee. But the penalty, it was a handball. The cross came in from the corner, and it didn't seem like he was looking at it, but he sort of nudged the ball out of the way of, can't remember who the striker was, might have been Kubo, but definitely hitting his arm and then taking an opportunity away from the Sociedad forward line. But do you think it is a handball? Because to me, it seemed like it probably was the right decision from the referee.
It definitely is the right decision. Yeah, 100%. It was handball, and his reaction was unwarranted. But I do feel that he's I don't know. We've seen a lot about emotion. Last weekend in the FA Cup, we saw a lot of people getting red cards, yellow cards for their reaction to the referee. And I'm for that decision of referees being strong and not accepting that it's okay to respond like that. I don't think there's very much to say about it. If you ask my personal opinion, it's not a handball, or I could argue that it's definitely a harsh handball. But in the letter of the law, it's a stonewall penalty and deserved and well taken.
It's one of those where it sort of depends on the referee and how lenient they're feeling, and that's where I think football refereeing does need to be improved, so we can be a bit more familiar with the actual rules of the game. But I was saying last thing, but this is the last thing. I would like to talk about the Manchester United substitutions that were made, because I saw a lot of influence on Manchester United's attack. Granted, little amount of attack towards the end, but the attack that was happening towards the end did come a lot through Toby Collier, who came on with a few minutes to go, and on the ball, I thought he was terrific. Lindelöf also came on and helped see the game out for a draw. I was definitely impressed with those two. Do you feel the same way? And do you think maybe there should be some more time for players like Toby Collier?
It's a good point you make. This, I think, this is exactly where Amarin should use the rest of the season. He's got 10 games now in the Premier League to work out who he is going to create a team with on around for next season. There is 0 point to worry about anything else apart from being experimental in the Premier League, in my opinion. He isn't going to get sacked. They're going to keep him until the end of the season. It would be a monstrosity to sack him before then. So try everything you want in the meantime, and using people like Collier, using these people that we don't know the names of on the bench, and find players that you want to build a team around, and then that'll give you a foundation to work on next season. I also wanted to give a little shout out to Real Sociedad's sub Becker. He was quality when he came on.
Oh, he was good. He was
Created
very
so
good.
many
Yeah.
chances.
That was a very weird ending to the match, though, when he was jumping up and down with the fans after colliding with I can't remember who it was, and then afterwards deciding to go down holding his leg. So I'm very confused by the ending of that match. Anyway, we'll move on from Manchester United 1-1 in Spain, return fixture at Old Trafford, and a bit of a home advantage heading into that second leg. Someone who doesn't have a home advantage, who does have a home advantage, but doesn't have quite the same results in the away leg, are Tottenham Hotspur, who went to Alkmaar and lost 1-0. It was a freakish own goal from Lucas Bergvall, but Michael, alarm bells have to be ringing now in the white side of North London.
Yeah, it is a pendulum that is swinging with the Tottenham side. It has to be. One shot on target away from home in Europe is just quite simply not good enough. They should be going to win that game, and they've come away with a really poor performance. They dominated possession, but yeah, I don't know what is happening at Tottenham. I find it such a strange club to try and understand, because the run of form in recent games has been okay, but they were on about sacking and 2 weeks ago. So I don't quite know where or what Tottenham fans want, and I don't know what they're getting out of it, because games like this kind of thing make you think that they're not anywhere further on. It's a worrying time to be a Tottenham fan.
Well, I would like to give a shout out to Kevin Danso, because he is someone that was very much at the heart of the Spurs defence. Came in January, and he ended up making 15 clearances for Tottenham. So definitely someone who made sure it was only one. But it is a catastrophic time for Tottenham. Not just looking at their defence, because their defence are only doing as well as they should be. But when you look at their midfield and their attack, they are the ones letting the side down. I mean, what's happened to Song Hyun-min, Mikey? It seems
Yeah,
like he's just completely disappeared this season, and it was
yeah.
another awful performance from his perspective last night.
Yeah, no, agreed. And like, you talk about people like him who are very important to this team. And then you've got Benton Cure, who's got a booking in this game, and that rules him out of the second leg next
Mm.
week. And that's a huge miss in the centre of midfield for a team like Tottenham. They're not going to
And
win this competition. I will put that out there. I don't think we need to waste too much time on them. It was so bad tonight.
yeah, it was not a good showing. I think teams such as Athletic Bilbao might become favourites, because they're having a terrific time in La Liga, and I mean, they're facing Roma. So if they get past them, they'll have all the motivation to go on and believe that they can provide a proper threat. And then you've got another team like Lyon, who literally have nothing to lose because they're getting relegated, and I mean, this is the last hurrah, and they have way more to worry about than Spurs, who just at the moment don't seem like they want to run. I was looking at the last sort of 10 minutes of this game, and what amazed me about Spurs is their defense were doing all of the hard work, and then as soon as it was time for them to counter, and they were on the back foot for the majority of the end of that game, when the time came for them to counter, they just looked so flat and they weren't getting forward fast enough. I mean, I know Dominic Solanke's coming back from an injury, but he really was missing in this one. Matthijs Tel didn't do enough for me, and when you get players like Bentancur who just aren't keeping their heads, and Lucas Bergvall who hasn't been terrific in 2025, it's a worry. It's a massive, massive worry for Spurs. And if Ange wants to keep his job, then he needs to work out a system which benefits the midfield more. Because at the moment, they're miles away from the attack and also miles away from the defense. They don't know how to adapt to different situations of the game. I don't know if that just comes down to a little bit of inexperience and a bit of naivety, or if that's just a lack of direction. But it's a huge worry for Spurs at the moment, and this is a team they should be beating, especially when you got players like Troy Parrott, a player that came from their academy, and they just didn't really know how to deal with him in their defense. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah,
And
it's massive. And the fact that like Solanke came back, he had 15 minutes, first came back after injury, and he went off injured. It's just none of it's really helping the team.
no,
It's all stacking up. And I guess Premier League form is the only way that they're going to be able to
yeah.
push on from this.
I mean, the only positive I can think of is looking at their bench and seeing Van der Ven and Romero back on their bench now. So that could be. I mean, with Ben Davies coming back as well, he's only a few days back from recovery, apparently. That will be a huge boost, because that is what they have been blaming all of their bad fortune on this season, that having no defenders. But if they come back and they're put back into defence and they aren't ready, and then that just aggravates the injury, where do you go from there? So they need to be careful. And even if they are playing well and they're still losing, then that shows that you can't just blame it on the injuries. It's down to bad tactics in midfield, which is the way I saw it. And I think Spurs are a lost cause this season. And this is a match that means so much to Spurs fans. When you think they're out of every competition and they are relying on this for any sign of silverware, and they go and lose to Alkmaar, a team they should be beating.
Mm-hmm.
How does that make you feel as a Spurs fan?
Yeah, probably similar to how they felt for the last few years. In all honesty,
Yeah,
it's not great. You want your team to show up, and I just feel sorry for anyone who's paid good money to go and watch them yesterday.
Anyway, so Spurs now playing at White Hart Lane, as I still like to call it. I'm old-fashioned that way, but still playing at White Hart Lane in the return leg. 1-0 down, but if they do have Van der Ven and Romero fully back, not just rushing them back, but fully back, then that will be a big help. Now our final match in Europe, in the Conference League, Chelsea went to Copenhagen, and they were the only English team last night that got a victory. 2-1, still conceding a goal, still a little bit worried about that Chelsea defence. Chalobah was playing at right back, and it didn't seem like he had the best match. And Reece James starting again in midfield. Now that is something that is a surprise to me, and also a shout out to young Shamira Mueka, I think is the way you pronounce his name. 17 years old, played the full first half. It seems like Enzo Maresca is still experimenting with this Chelsea team, Mikey.
Yeah, absolutely, and a definite change in this game. The first half was, an average performance, and a triple substitution at half time invigorated the Chelsea side. And just touching on Reece James, what a finish! 25
Yeah.
yards, took it fantastically.
Do
I
you
thought
think
they
the
did
keeper
really
maybe
well.
should have done better, however? Ramai in goal. I could have got down a bit quicker. It wasn't moving that fast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fair enough. But take nothing away from Reece James. Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
Um,
It's great for
the
him, but I would also just like to highlight their goalkeeper also didn't make a single save in that entire match.
and I think Chelsea only had two on target, did they? Is that right?
Yeah, I think that is correct,
Yeah.
actually, yes.
Yeah.
Clinical.
Clinical, and that's all that matters. Fernandez for them has been proving his value in recent games for me. I've noticed him a few times now, and he's starting to crop up with goals, which is the part of the game that I felt that he was missing. Um,
Yeah.
so I think bringing that into a Chelsea side that is still experimenting is good. But I also like the idea that your manager does make bold decisions, such as a triple change at half time, and the team still respond to it, because sometimes that can have a negative effect. But it definitely hasn't in this game. So yeah, I think Chelsea will see that out at Stamford Bridge quite comfortably.
Yeah, it was a very strange it's a very strange lineup looking at this Chelsea team as well, with Dewsbury Hall on the left. And you mentioned Enzo Fernandez having found his form. I think Marc Cucurella has been a fantastic player for Chelsea this season. He got an assist off the bench coming on for Malo Gusto, who did go off injured. So there's a little bit of a worry there from a Chelsea perspective. But they capitalized off a Copenhagen mistake, which resulted in their own pressing. They are playing with some bravery, and is that, do you think, going to be enough to carry them into the top four? Because it really is all to play for, and it seems like they have the squad depth to balance Europe on top of the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea have got the biggest squad in Europe, I think. I mean, that's not official GSPN stats, I'm saying, I'm making that up, but they have got a huge squad. So managing both is not a problem. It's form for Chelsea and consistency that is key. I am really excited to see how European football plays out in the Premier League, as in where people finish. And Chelsea, for me, are in a very, very good position to
Yeah, they.
either push into Champions League football, but also in the parapet of, if a couple of results don't go their way and teams below them get the right results, they're quite quickly out of European football as well. It is very, very competitive from 10th, 11th, maybe, up to third,
Yeah,
let's be honest.
and a big match this weekend between Brighton and Fulham will be resembling that, absolutely. And we will talk more about that after this short break.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionic, the world's most personalized supplements. Bionic provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimize your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionic. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out as the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone, AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the description to learn more about Zencastr. So we will talk about the Brighton-Fulham match shortly, but first I just want to touch on what, in my opinion, is the pick of the bunch this weekend. Nottingham Forest against Manchester City. Third against fourth in the Premier League. And, I mean, I suppose when you think of Manchester City recently, the word that often comes up is inconsistent. Do you think that's fair, or do you think people are just being a little bit harsh on their recent form based on their own former high standards?
Yeah, and I think you can only determine success based on high standards. So I think it's unfair to say that we shouldn't compare them against their very best because let's be honest, they were the best in Europe, and the Premier League for the last however many years it's been now. But they have had a few good results of late. Take away the best teams in Europe that they've played against. So they've played against Madrid and Liverpool, lost both those games. But other than that, around the edges, they've played really well, getting some good results. Plymouth was a fantastic FA Cup game from the perspective of it being an FA Cup fixture, but Plymouth made it very difficult for City, but City managed that situation quite well. This is going to be a really, really interesting game. Forest are going in the back of this with what I would consider a poor run of form. They've struggled of late to produce what we were used to seeing with Nottingham Forest. And from my point of view, I really hope that they kick into gear and get results because I would love to see them in European football. But I could quite easily see how they slip out of Champions League or even Europa League football too.
Yeah, and they absolutely deserve to have something to commemorate how good this season has been. Whether that's getting to an FA Cup final, maybe even winning the FA Cup. It's been an amazing season for Forest, and I think the least they can hope for is top four. I mean, they're guaranteed Europe basically at this stage, in my opinion. And when you look at their players that they have, even Jota Silva has been terrific for Forest. Who would have thought that before a season started? Chris Wood been amazing, and Morgan Gibbs White. But when you look at on paper Manchester City's side, Omar Marmoush has been a revelation, and even the cult hero that is becoming of Kusanov in defence. And it's a very it's poised for absolutely every aspect of unpredictability. When you look at the fact that it's at 12:30 as well, something that any punter will tell you is not something that you should bet on. And Forest as well, not been in the best of form themselves recently, especially in the Premier League, not winning any of their last three, losing two, those against Fulham and Newcastle, drawing recently against Arsenal. That was a very close match, but you can't predict this one, can you, Mikey?
No, and I think what makes this better, if it was at City, I'd say it's a City win. But the fact that it's at Forest, I feel gives the game another edge. And as you've already alluded to, the early kickoff is always a significant battle. I do think, though, that this could be an eye opener for who remains in Champions League positions. If City win this game, it's a massive game for them to win. And I think getting to third will do a lot for the team's morale. And hopefully Pep Guardiola and the rest of the team will have the experience to manage that situation. And it'll take them away from the precarious position that they're currently in, which is just on the edge of Champions League football next year, which for any Man City fan, player or member of staff is an absolute must.
And I'll just tell you this quick stat in the Premier League between Manchester City and Nottingham Forest. Since Forest have been promoted, they have played against Manchester City 5 times. They have won none of those games and have only managed to score 1 goal. Manchester City scoring quite a few more with with 14 in those 5 matches, including a 6-0 win. So this season has been quite different, but City winning 3-0 earlier in the season with Silva, De Bruyne and Doku all scoring at the Etihad on a cold Wednesday night in December. So all to play for in that one. Then we've got the other 6-pointer that I alluded to earlier, Brighton against Fulham. How important is this match to these two teams, Mikey?
Yeah, massive. I would say this is why it's so beautiful. They're literally next to each other in the table. 1 point is the difference between them. I said Brighton probably go into this game as a favourite, winning 5 out of the last 5, and they're at home. I just think it's so beautiful. Like Brighton are 3 points off fifth as it stands. So if games go their way, they could be looking at sitting in the European spot at the end of the weekend, which is quite phenomenal. Really, I would probably go to back Brighton, but I have been impressed with Fulham and how they've played recently, how they've changed their run of form and started to grind out results against teams like the Wolves game is sticking in my head. How they managed to turn that game
Yeah,
into a victory.
that was good. And also with these two teams, they're two of the teams still in the FA Cup as well. So they have got a lot of matches still to be played for their hopes in Europe next season, whether that's winning the FA Cup or qualifying through table finish. But yeah, I mean, it's what it like you mentioned earlier, looking from 10th to 4th, and the fact that there are only 5 points separating them. It's by far the most exciting part of the season, just looking at that top 4 finish, because let's face it, Liverpool have probably won the league now. We pretty much know that the 3 promoted sides are going straight back down, but the battle for Europe is really hotting up. And like you mentioned, Brighton at home, you do tip them to win, especially considering their recent form and the fact that they have sort of slow cooked their way into having a decent second half of the season. I mean, Karu Matoma in recent weeks has been phenomenal, hasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, without doubt. I think he's such a classy footballer. And just going back onto the that very competitive section of the table, the difference in psychology is going to be fascinating because the Brighton Fulham game, whichever way that game actually goes, there's so many teams above that play later. So Chelsea, Newcastle, Bournemouth all don't play until days after, so Sunday or Monday, which
Yeah.
is really interesting because if Brighton were to win, they would be pushing. Well, they'd be in sixth place, and the other teams psychologically would be going into that game with a different look
Mm.
than knowing that Brighton drop points.
Yeah, this is the definition of a 6 pointer, this one. So, do you want to make any predictions for that one? You said Brighton to win, but it must be quite a tight match as well.
Yeah, I'd probably go for another 2-1, to be fair, Brighton.
And just one more point on that match. 2 players will be suspended from that match, one on either side. Sasha Lukic of Fulham and Tariq Lamptey of Brighton. And just seeing the injury list as well. Wilson, Tete, Nelson, all out for the foreseeable. Likely to miss this one. And for Brighton, Kadioglu. I mean, what a game he had against us, Liverpool fans, will know all about him. He will be out. Igor will be out. James Milner, the man, the myth, the legend, will be out. Steele, Veltman, and Dunk as well. Probably going to be doubts. Now, looking ahead to another pick of the weekend, historically speaking, Manchester United, as we were discussing earlier, drawing last night in Spain, will be hosting Arsenal on Sunday afternoon. Patrick Dorgu is suspended for this one, so he'll miss out. And I mean, is this potentially a turning point for Manchester United's season if they can get anything out of this one? Arsenal had a very good week in Europe, defeating PSV as well. That will give them some momentum.
Yeah, and a comprehensive victory at that. Yeah, 7-1 away from home is quite an extraordinary result. For me, it's a very nothing game in definition of what will happen to the league. I don't think it really matters. As I alluded to earlier, I think European football and club competition in that sense will be more their priority. Ensuring for United, it's got to be experimenting with the team, getting
Yeah.
a little bit of consistency. For Arsenal, they would want to maintain and manage their players. I would be very surprised if Arteta alludes to the fact that the league's over, but we know as people that have an understanding of the point system that the chances of them catching it are very, 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 very slim. So
Yeah.
all Arsenal can do is try to produce good football, good results, and manage their players so they can do well in European football, in my opinion.
From a Manchester United perspective, this is probably the best time to play Arsenal. They're without Bukayo Saka, they're without Gabriel Martinelli, Gabriel Jesus is out for the rest of the season, and Kai Havertz, the top scorer, is also out. So if there is a time for Manchester United to host Arsenal, it would probably be now. Despite Manchester United having their own players missing, including Manuel Ugarte and Lisandro Martinez, especially being one. I mean, is that something that changes your perspective of the game?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult to come into a United game and know what to expect. Whether you've got a good team with all the players playing against you, or a team that's missing some of their big stars, and the same for United. There is nothing. I would be shocked if I am anything other than underwhelmed at the performance of Man United at the end of that game. A draw would be a fantastic result. I would take that now.
And just alluding to Liverpool as well, it seems like something that we don't really have to talk about too much. I mean, this could be clipped and this could be me completely jinxing the match at the moment, but first versus 20th for Liverpool at Anfield against Southampton. I spoke to the Southampton boys earlier in the week. They said that they are hoping that the deficit is less than 4. That is genuinely a direct quote from them. Is there room for a surprise, or do you think this is going to be a complete thrashing?
Well, there's a difference of 86 goals between the sides
Oh my gosh.
this season. I would be
Oh.
surprised if that isn't another 10 on top. If Liverpool wanted to turn the screw, I would be very, very shocked if this game wasn't, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's got potential to be huge.
And our final match that I'm going to talk about, Wolves against Everton. Maybe earlier in the season, this could have been a proper relegation scrap. But both of those teams are pretty safely away from the relegation zone for the time being, both playing pretty good football. I think Everton, are completely away from it now. 32 points, and Ipswich still on 17. But if Wolves can get a win against Everton, especially since they're at home in the Molineux, it's a late kickoff. The fans will be drunk, up for it, pumped. Would that secure them safety, do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a massive game. I'm trying to create a little bit of tension going into the relegation battle, but I genuinely think if Wolves win this weekend, the expected result for Ipswich and Leicester will be losses at respective Palace and Chelsea, playing both away football. I can't see them getting a result. As I say, if Wolves win that, it'll take the deficit to 8 points. And I just think that will be a step too far. That means 3 games that Wolves have to lose, and Ipswich and Leicester have to win those games as well. I don't see it in the remaining 10, 11 fixtures, 10 fixtures after this weekend.
Yeah, that will be. Well, it's still a very difficult team to host as well, Everton. I mean, David Moyes has been a revelation there, hasn't he?
Yeah, they couldn't have asked for any more from David Moyes, from being in a position where they were potentially one of the teams likely to go down to now being a cert that's not going down, 10 points away from 17th position. I just think, yeah, David Moyes has got to be over the moon, as well as all the Everton fans, because let's be honest, they couldn't have brought in a brand new stadium in the Championship.
Well, that would have been very enjoyable for me as a Liverpool fan. And just a quick mention for Wolves. Well, I know all the talk has been about Matheus Cunha getting 13 goals and 4 assists this season from a very weak Wolves side. But a special mention to Ryan Aït-Nouri and Nelson Semedo, the two wing-backs. They have been terrific this season. Aït-Nouri well within a shout for the left-back of the season. But they've been making a lot of difference for the West Midlands side, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. The attacking down the wings and deliveries into the middle have created more chances for people like Cunha to take, and I think that's what Wolves have relied on recent games, and I think it could be a really close game, and probably will end up being a draw if I had to make a prediction.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's not a bad shout. And Matheus Cunha is not your conventional striker either. He's one of those players that will just drift across the entire pitch, picking up the ball and trying to make something of it in dangerous areas. And it makes it makes having actual forward wingers sort of futile in a way, because he's so creative and he can pose a threat from any part of the pitch, even if it is in a congested midfield, because he's so good with his feet. If there is a player that will make a difference, surely it's got to be him that will be the difference maker.
yeah, absolutely. My question is he playing or is he suspended?
Oh, that's a good point,
Did he
actually.
get sent off
He did.
this
He did.
weekend?
Yes, you're I completely forgot about that. Yes, Matheus Cunha will not be playing in this game through suspension. So that will make it. Maybe that could tip it in Everton's favour, Mikey. Well done for pulling me up on that, because I sound ridiculous now for saying that he'll make a difference. Maybe as a fan from the stands, starting
In
a
the
chance.
changing room, yeah. And he
That would
should
tip
never
it in
have,
Everton's favour, though. Yeah.
he should never have been sent off. He was silly and let his emotions run too high just before the penalty shootout. Yeah, so it will be interesting to see how they adapt without him, without a doubt, because I think you've highlighted just how important he is to that side.
Yeah, well, he's been by far and away their biggest contributor to goals and assists this season. I mean, Nori is the only one with any more assists than him, with 5, and it's really thrown a spanner in the works, because I always said about Wolves, if anything happens to Matheus Cunha, they are a much worse side. I mean, you can't rely on fullbacks to give you goals without some form of genius in between the goal and the fullback position. So it will be interesting, and I have to say, I do think Everton now will have the advantage. The only thing that I can point to is the atmosphere at the Molineux being very hostile at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. It's an amazing stadium, brilliant fans, and the fact that they're all drunk on a Saturday night will be a very alarming one for Everton to go to. So that is an interesting game, and definitely one to look out for if you get time on your Saturday night. But I think we will end the podcast there. Mikey, it's been a pleasure joining you on the Friday forecast. I know it's not one that I usually involved in, but it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, great to be with you again, and I love that Cunha is going to be the issue for Wolves, and we will see whether Wolves can stamp their authority and remaining in the Premier League this season.
So you can join us for the Monday review, where we will be looking back on the weekend's action after it's happened. But from all of us here at the Daily English Podcast on the Global Sports Podcast Network, enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.